If you listen, if you have Facebook, you know we live in a very colorful time, probably about as colorful politically as 1800 was. And we are about as isolated from one another in many ways on these polar opposites as we've been in a long time. But one of the joys of being an American is that you get to listen to terrible things being said about the President of the United States, and nobody gets arrested.
Yeah, that's true.
It is one of the great gifts of being American.
Yeah.
And whether you are a great supporter of the President of the United States or whether you're one of those people saying those things, it doesn't really matter. We allow that to happen. There are countries in the world still to this day where you can be arrested for saying things that Americans say every day against people in power. To actually criticize people in power will get you killed, not just arrested. And we take these things for granted because we've always had them. We've always had the freedom, and so we accept that the freedom is just kind of a given. And then freedom, unfortunately, turns into something else, because freedom is not a natural state. Thomas Jefferson is wrong when he says in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain rights, those rights being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The thing that God gives us is a desire for life, a desire for liberty, and a desire for happiness. But God does not give any of those to us. They are not ours to have. In this life, we are not free. If you leave us alone to our own devices, we will enslave ourselves. It's what we do. We're good at it. If you leave us alone, we will not live. We will die. The life that we have is much like one of these websites where you get the intro version of the packet, right? You get 30-day trial. And what happens in the 30-day trial? Poof, it's over. Well, that is our life, isn't it? It's not life. And when you get to be my age, you realize the 30 days goes fast. Amen? Amen. You think 30 days last forever when you're 18. It doesn't last forever. It goes fast. All of these things are actually gifts of God. They're not gifts that we have. And when we think we have them, we pervert them. We twist them. Life becomes something I have and you don't. Too bad about you. And then life becomes being about being better than you, being good. Liberty becomes a right that I have to ignore the fact of what is going on around me and not to face those things that I don't want to face. What do we all do with a difficult situation where you have a choice? Yeah. We go easy route. If I have a choice to do this and feel pain or not do this and not feel pain, what am I going to choose?
No pain.
No pain. And the problem with choosing no pain is you don't actually end up choosing no pain. It's more like the Fram oil filter old ad used to be. Remember that one? They sold oil filters. We basically say you can pay me now, or when the engine blows up, you can pay me later. And when you pay me later, it's a heck of a lot more money. Little filter, big problem. What are you going to do? And the problem with running away from pain is it multiplies the pain. How many of us have had a situation where we've run away and run away and run away and run away, and we finally get to a place that you can't run away anymore, and then you turn and face it and you realize how huge this pile of pain is that you have to absorb. And if you had faced it back there, it would have been this big. Snowballs rolling downhill get bigger. And the problem for us is we are all creatures of this world. And the churches of Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea demonstrate what happens to us. What happens to us when Christ sets us free? The first thing that usually happens to us is we sit back on our laurels and say, Jesus died on the cross, so I don't have to. He took all of my sin away, so now I'm clean, and now I have no sin, and now I don't have any worries. Life is good. And if you stay there, you don't end up just sitting sighing, you end up sitting snoring. And it's happened to every one of us. Jesus does something wonderful for you. He brings something wonderful and he takes something away that you never thought he could take. And so you give thanks to him for a little while, and then you assume that you have vacation because you had a lot of time where you were bearing that burden, and it was hard, and it was difficult, and it was heavy, and so you need some time to rest. How many of us have ever taken a rest from reading the Bible? Honest answer, come on. All right.
Guilty.
How many of us have taken a rest from worship?
Guilty.
How many of us have taken a rest from prayer?
Guilty.
What happens to you when you try and start again? Oh my gosh, this is hard. Why am I doing it? It would just be so much easier to just keep going without doing it. And what Sardis is struggling with is this freedom that comes from this of being free from all of the weight of the things that have been around them. They're still holding fast to the teaching because they're not under pressure yet. These last churches, the pressure is not as strong as it is at Smyrna. It's not as strong as it is at the other places. So Sardis is still sitting in the light, but it's asleep in the light. And what happens if you stay asleep too long? The body has urges, it has needs. Things happen. And John says, there are some of you whose clothes are not soiled. There are some of you who didn't sleep through the last 5 years, 5 days, and try and act like you didn't have any bodily needs. Nothing actually happened. But you actually, when you sleep, when you are asleep that long, stuff happens. You get dirty. And that's really what the words mean. These are the words that you'd use for a baby who's in a diaper. Some of you have not yet soiled your clothes. And the problem for us is to not do that, you have to be able to wake up. You have to be able to stay awake. And to those who stayed awake, he says, they are the ones who will be clothed in white. They are the ones who will stand. It's a hard thing to do, especially when there's no great crying need, right? Why read my Bible? Why pray? Life is good. Jesus took all that stuff away. Everything's easy for me in this stage of life. And the problem for us comes, what? Does this stage of life last forever? Unfortunately, the truth of all things in life is this too shall pass. And it's true for the good and it's true for the bad. If we stay asleep in the good times, we are not going to be ready when the bad times come. Philadelphia has the blessing of all of these churches, in that Philadelphia is clearly the church of the poor. Of all of these churches, Philadelphia is the church of the people who don't have a lot of choices. And the blessing of being in a place in your life where you don't have a lot of choices is you have to do things. One of the great gifts of growing up inside the household that I did, when you're dealing with trauma on a daily basis, you don't really have the option of not dealing with it. It's there. You have to face it. And it means that you have to face things that you don't want to face. The choice is not given to you. Poverty is one of the great gifts of God for the people of God. Because what poverty does is it takes away from us the power to choose. I can't say I will run away from this because there's nowhere I can run. There's nothing I can do to face this. And he says to Philadelphia, because you don't have any choices, you've actually stayed. And because you've stayed, you will be a pillar in the temple of God. You will be part of what makes God's house stand. Is that where you are? You know, sometimes, especially when we're poor, we grumble. And we sing with Tevye, if I were a rich man, right? I wouldn't have to work hard. But we don't appreciate the gift. And it is hard to see it as a gift in the moment. But if you look back, you see the gift that comes from not having a choice. There are huge gifts that came to me for my life because I didn't have a choice. I will admit it's taken me 30 or 40 years to see them as gifts because the not having a choice is so graphic and so painful and so difficult. But the reality of it is I wouldn't be able to walk the walk that I walk if I didn't have that discipline in me. If you're in a place where you don't have choice, look at where God is in that. He's at work in it. Stand and do what he asks you to do and watch what he can do. But most of us, we are Laodiceans. Because we're Americans. We've always had choices. You don't go to the grocery store and buy one kind of detergent, right? I was just there the other day, and my gosh, there are 5 new kinds. I don't know what any of these things are. I've never heard of them before. But, they're all on the end caps there to make you buy them for sale, because you can't just buy soap. You have to buy this new improved soap. You can't just buy cereal. You got to have 15,000 kinds of cereal. We don't want to just have church. We got to have 2 different kinds of church. We got to have choices because that's who we are. We believe in the smorgasbord. We want to be able to choose because we're used to being rich. We're used to being people of privilege. And one of the great gifts that comes with privilege, as Tevye says, when you're rich, they think you really know, right? They think you're an objective force. They think that you actually have some greater knowledge. And so we pretend to be objective about things. We pretend to be able to say, we understand how things really are. And the joy of being objective is it makes it look like you're not on either side. Right? You have your own independent place. We Presbyterians have a corner on this market inside the spiritual reality of America. We have cornered it for a long time because we have always been educated, expensive, and exclusive. And one of the ways in which we do it is we try and say, well, let's objectively look at the facts of this. Let's step back and look at this and see what scientifically something says. Let's look at this and be able to understand this from an august Olympian point of view. And the problem with it is no human being ever gets to Olympus. We have no claim on that august view. Every single one of us is biased. Every single one of us is on one side or the other. And that's what John is saying to Laodicea. You want to be this objective power, and you want to make your own decisions because you think you're rich enough and strong enough and powerful enough to do it. At least if you were hot, I'd know that. And if you were cold, I'd know that. You would at least be honest. But the truth of trying to say that you're objective is that you're cold, but you won't admit it. Because you're claiming your own self as the power to be able to decide what is true and what is not, what is real and what is not. And so what he says is, since you are neither cold nor hot, you want to be objective, you stink, you are bad, poisonous food. Who here's ever taken a drink of milk that's about 10 days out?
Yeah.
My grandfather, when my grandmother died, he didn't throw anything out of the refrigerator, and he would use it all. It was truly astounding why he didn't get more food poisoning than he did. I remember when we went over there to clean out his refrigerator, and you pour out the milk, and it goes ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And he was drinking it the day before. That's what he's referring to. You're neither cold nor hot. Oh my gosh, get this out of my mouth. This is poison. This is not food. This is not nourishment. This is not anything that will give me strength. Since you are neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. And then we have this picture that is a picture of the American church. It's a picture of this church when I came here 15 years ago. One of the things that we had was we had ushers' responsibilities that were out here. And when I came in, literally at 11 o'clock, and there was only one service when I came in, at 11 o'clock. At 11:01, these doors all got locked. Because the important thing was that everybody in the building feel safe. The important thing was to make sure that everybody in the building knew no stranger was walking in the building. And it was one of the weirdest experiences of worship to be able to be in the middle of, because truthfully, we've been in this church as long as I've been around. You know, nobody shows up on time around here, and we're kind of all a little on the loosey-goosey side. I'm sorry if that comes as news to you, but it is. It's something we've all struggled with. And so what would happen is at 11:05, you'd hear the ka-chung, 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 ka-chung at the door. Somebody saying, "Hey, I came to worship. Are you all in there?" And you'd have to stop worshiping and say to one of the ushers, "Would you open the door, please? Somebody's at the door." How do you lock Jesus out of the church? By being the objective believer. By believing you have the objective truth. By believing your reading of Calvin's Institutes is the superior understanding. By believing that because you can read in Hebrew and Greek, you have all of the knowledge necessary. By believing that the thought of being rich and having choices means I can also choose to turn my back on the world. It's a picture that is pitiable, and we've turned it into this picture that we love, right? It's in almost every Sunday school class. I don't remember who painted it, oh, Jesus, with the lantern coming to the door, because we've turned it into this evangelistic picture. But that's not what the picture is, as John puts it out. What he's saying is, you guys have locked Jesus out of the church. How does that happen? How does Jesus stand at the outside of your church knocking? What is wrong with you people? Well, we need to be safe. Who determines your safety?
Thank you,
Amen.
Jesus.
That's right.
Our Lord.
If you are the objective truth, you determine your safety. You determine your safety by how much insurance you have. You determine your safety by whether you know the doors are locked. You determine your safety by making sure you have enough in your IRA. You determine your safety by 1,000 different things. And what we have done is we have empowered that spirit within the church, and because we have, the church is dead. The price of freedom, this is one thing Thomas Jefferson did get right. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. You want to be free in Jesus? You've got to be vigilant. Because your spirit of slavery will always put itself out again. You never get to the point where Sardis does. Oh, it's gone. I'm free. You know, how many of us have climbed the first molehill of our life in Christ and said, I got to the top of Mount Everest. I'm all done. There are no more heights to climb. I'm clean. I'll sit down here and enjoy the view. We all do it. We all did it. You have to learn that climbing is the point of this, not getting to the view.
Thank you, Jesus.
It's not what you can see, it's whether you're doing the next step. We have to accept the idea, as Philadelphia does, that that's the way life is. And you just keep at it, because you don't have any choice. If you are rappelling up a sheer cliff, you can't come to the middle of it and say, I think I'll stop here. Not a good idea. You have to keep going. And because Philadelphia has to keep going, Philadelphia is finding its strength. And Laodicea is sitting down at the base of the cliff and criticizing the people who are climbing. That's bad form. That person isn't going to make it. What Jesus is asking us to do is to be vigilant, to use the freedom he gives us to take our place in God's people. There was a discussion that happened among the leadership after the shooting down in Central Texas. And this building wasn't built for security, let's be honest. When you grow like Topsy in this building has been built in 4 different stages, and they ran out of money every time, except for this one. This is the one building they didn't run out of money on. So there's always some interesting stuff that's going on around here. This building is the gift that keeps on giving. But where everybody was saying, oh, how are we going to deal with security? What do we do? How do we do this? There are churches now that are having people sitting in there with guns. There are folks who are saying, like this church did, lock all the doors at 11:01, make sure nobody can get in. And the reality of all of that is, it is a spirit where Jesus is not present. Who is my security? Somebody walks in the door, and they have a gun, and they want to start shooting. They won't shoot you first. Amen? All right, let's get real about this. They won't shoot you first. You're not the first face they'll see. And if that's the way I go, that's the way I go. And I'm not worried about it. Praise God. Because ultimately, the path that I walk in this world is not my path. The path I walk is the path Jesus gives me. What path are you walking? Are you asleep? Are you walking it? Or are you sitting at the bottom, criticizing other people, acting like a professor of walking when you haven't stepped lately?
That's good.
If you have placards in your hand, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, if you see yourself judging somebody else, you are from Laodicea. Be careful, that's poison. Jesus can't keep you. Get at the work. And it's hard, and it doesn't stop. But the blessing is, when we do the work, like Philadelphia, we are prepared to stand.
Hallelujah.
What we're watching, I think, in this time, in this place, among the churches of Jesus Christ, among the churches that I've watched in the 15 years I've been here, is that the churches of those who want Jesus to knock at the door to come in, nobody knocks at them anymore. Those churches have sold. They become something else. Trinity Presbyterian Church down on Zang is going to be, I think, a coffee bar or something. The rest of the property is now apartments. Are the doors of your heart open? Are the doors of this church open? Are we prepared to do what we're called to do? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the blessing of this feast that brings us strength for the journey that lies ahead of us. Bless us, Lord Jesus, to be able to come to a place that we can see and understand that journey, at least a step.